Welcome to the Beyond the Mic Show, a show where we interview top coaches, consultants, and experts about topics that will help you run your coaching business more profitably and serve your clients more effectively. I'm your host, Matt Walrath, and today's guest is Alex Povey. I met Alex in Dave Smith's group, Online Trainers Federation, and Alex gave massive value to the group with a Facebook Live about the online coaching sales process. And I just knew I had to share his insights with you. I've heard from so many of you on business audit calls and in the online nutrition coach community that you don't feel confident closing the sale with prospective clients on a call. And Alex provides not only the framework for how your sales calls should go, but what you need to do before the calls even start to convert more prospects into clients so you can change their lives. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Hey, Beyond the Mic Show listeners. Today I have a special guest for you. His name is Alex Povey, and I met him through the Online Trainers Federation. You've seen my episode with Dave Smith, and Alex did an amazing training in the Online Trainers Federation group about how to actually sell your services as a coach. So I knew I had to have him on the show, and he was kind enough to share some time today to teach you how to sell your coaching services. So welcome to the show, Alex.
Hey, buddy. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate you having me on. I love talking about this subject. So looking forward to getting into it and delivering some value to your audience.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I think a great place for us to start out would just be to give people a little bit of an idea about what your selling background was. Like, have you always been good at selling things? Or were you that like lemonade stand entrepreneur, or was that something that you had to actually work up towards?
It's funny when you ask that because I never kind of intro myself with the kind of like early days of entrepreneurship, but I used to sell sweets at school. Now that you say that, I used to buy sweets in bulk and I used to sell them in school for a markup. And I did that for about 2 years, and I'd make sometimes I'd make £50 to £100 a week as like a kid. But when I first started out selling, I was terrible. I was probably the worst sales guy because I was like very nice and I talked too much. And I remember my first sales job, I started at this property investment firm. It was kind of like my dream job, selling off-plan investments. I think it's called like pre-construction, where you might be, or if you guys in America, construction, so before it's built. I used to sell these properties to like investors. And I remember my first couple of months, I was super excited. I got into this company and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do great. I'm going to make loads of money. It's going to be awesome. And I didn't sell anything. I really, really struggled to sell anything. And I was banging my head against the wall because I was working hard and I was putting in the hours, but I just wasn't getting the returns. I wasn't making the sales. So I was like, okay, something's wrong here. And then probably about 3 months into my journey in this company, this trainer came in, kind of Wolf of the Wall Street-esque, like Jordan Belfort. And he was very direct, very charismatic, and really knew how to sell. And he was a sales trainer. I think he cost about $4,000 a day just to come in and train the sales force. And so he got me in a room and he basically broke me down to an inch of my life psychologically and showed me all the reasons why I was struggling to sell, because it was kind of like an internal thing that needed to be addressing. Also some skills and tactics and stuff as well. And I remember walking out of that room and my life didn't change and I didn't become a sales superstar, but I kind of had more self-awareness and realized that like selling was a skill and a profession that you can actually learn, but you have to really kind of immerse yourself in it. It's not just talking or sharing information. There's an actual art to it. And it's not a science either, right? Everyone asks about like what do you say when someone says I need to think about it. It's not just about canned responses. It's about like human behavior, psychology, understanding people's body languages and knowing how to respond. So there's so many different variables, but he gave me like a peek behind the curtain into it was much more than just what to say and how to say it. And then from there, I just spent a load of time just practicing and learning and reading books and training with this mentor. And then over the next couple of months, I started making sales. And then within 6 months, I was in the top 5. And then I think in a year, I was in like the top 3 and I was making, I think just over 100,000 in my first sales job straight out of university. So I was making like 5x most of my graduates. And that was pretty cool. And I loved that. And it was a great experience. And then towards the end of that position, I kind of got the taste for wanting to go into business myself and do things on my own terms. Because I was seeing the CEO, I was seeing the director build this amazing multi-million-pound company. I was like, you know what? I want to do that too. I think I can do it. And so we had this amazing opportunity to launch an e-com company. We got $1 million investment from an American investor, and me, my business partner, Dave Crawford. We launched this e-com company. We spent, I think it was about 2 years building it from literally zero. We flew to America. We looked at one of the models, copied it, came back and built it to a 7-figure company in about 18 months, doing about 2.9 million in revenue. And that was all very sales centric, but it was also kind of online sales. And that was kind of like my first venture into online selling, not just like over the phone or face to face. Then from there, we launched our social media agency, and then we launched our coaching company, Coach Ignited. And now we're very much involved with the OTF programs, the Online Trainers Federation that you mentioned with Dave, where we're helping coaches, fit pros, grow and scale their businesses. So hopefully that wasn't too long and short.
No, that was a great breakdown of your road. And the thing that a couple of things that really stood out to me. One being that over the course of a year with mentorship, you were able to go from grinding away, not making any sales, to being one of the top salespeople in your company. And so I loved that you pointed out that it's something that can be learned. It's not necessarily just an innate quality that you have. And the other thing I found really interesting was that you mentioned that getting into that room with your mentor, it was those inner shifts that you ended up making that made the biggest difference. And I thought it was interesting how you pointed out that selling is an art. And I think a lot of that art comes from that inner self. So I'm curious if you can speak more to those inner shifts that you made early on in the process of becoming a great salesperson.
Yeah, I think the inner shifts were really the self-awareness that I was being emotional a lot of the time. Okay, so I'm quite an emotional person anyway, but I've learned to not like contain it or like stop the emotions, but know when and when not to kind of use them. Because in sales, you don't really want to get super emotional, right? Because if you get emotional and you make emotional decisions, you can get defensive, right? Or you can step the wrong way and you can actually aggravate people and put them off. And so you have to be like very, very self-aware, and you've got to kind of keep your emotions in check. And one of the big things I learned was not getting attached to an outcome. So not getting attached to an outcome like the sale itself. So not like going, oh, I need to make this sale, or being bummed out if you don't sell, right? Because when you start getting wrapped up in the sale itself and it doesn't come through, that can destroy your whole week, or it can destroy your whole day. And then that knocks you off your game from them going out there and finding more clients and more prospects and generating more leads. So you've got to be really careful to keep your kind of emotions in check and not get attached to the sale. And also, like, just make sure you're following the process in a strategic way and a logical way versus allowing your emotions to run the process. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I learned about self-awareness in that internal game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's so interesting too that you bring up the point that being attached to that outcome, it's like you don't have that much control over what that person decides. And so it's really that idea that you are controlling what you can control, which is your emotions, versus the outcomes that are outside of yourself, even though you can influence them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a super interesting distinction. So I'm curious, since you've been working with Fit Pros, what is an example that you often see where people let their emotions get in the way in the selling process and it really sabotages them?
Yeah, you just broke up a little bit then. What was your question again?
Yeah, the question was, so now that you're working with Fit Pros, what is one of the more common things you see where you see their emotions get in the way and then it sabotages their ability to sell their services?
I think the big one is like expecting that every time they get on a phone call that people are going to buy, and then when they don't buy, they're bummed out, and then it stops them from moving ahead because they're getting too wrapped up in the rejection or the people that don't buy their products and services, when actually, like, you should be taking that as feedback and going, well, how can I do that better next time? And I encourage everyone to record calls, right? So just like you're recording this podcast, you can play it back, you can listen to it, you can gain the information again. The same with a sales call. You want to be recording it and you want to be analyzing it and evaluating, did I make the right moves? Did I take the right steps? Could I have handled that better? Versus, oh, they didn't buy. I'm rubbish at selling, and beating yourself up about it, because it's an ongoing process. Even now, I listen to some calls. So I'll still record at this level and I'll still listen to them and I'll go, actually, I'm going to tweak that little bit there because I didn't get the right response I was looking for, or they were confused when I said it. So it's not clear. I need to change it because I'm always selling new products, different services. And so like the process changed because the pitch changes. So you've constantly got to be making tweaks. But I think a lot of people just go into it and they don't immerse themselves in trying to learn from the feedback, and then they get beaten up when they don't make sales, when actually that's a feedback loop and it's an opportunity to actually grow and improve, because it's a constant thing. It never ends. Just like building a business, there's always something to learn on the other end. And so that's what I'd say on an emotional front. It's getting beat up about not selling and then not doing anything to improve it next time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just like you mentioned with selling being an art, it sounds like that iterative process is one of the big arts to it. Because if it was a science, you just have step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do that every single time, and you have 100% close rate.
You got it. You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a black and white thing, and anyone that says it is lying, because it's not. There's too many variables because you're dealing with humans. It's like human behavior, psychology. You don't actually know what's going on in their life. You can't figure that out in the space of a 40-minute call. So there's lots of hidden obstacles that you don't always see, or you don't know how someone's feeling, or you don't know what kind of like the pre-call process was for getting to that point. So you don't know what they've seen, what they believe, what they don't believe. And so like it is kind of a challenging process to take someone, particularly on a phone call, who is maybe super cold, has not seen a lot from you, and take that person and get them to hand over, I don't know, 4 figures in fees, right? And I think the sales process is not so much about the sales call itself. It's about the pre-sales process. So like everyone gets really hung up on the sales process, but your sales process will actually work really, really well if your nurturing process outside, i.e. your marketing, your content, and your credibility and social proof is really, really good. So people need to not only be focusing on the sales process itself, but what's happening before they get to that point. So the journey that prospect goes through, what are they seeing? What results are they seeing? Do you look credible? Are they able to find content that they can gorge on? Just like your podcast, Matt. Like this is a good nurturing tool for prospective clients because they're being able to hear some of this content, learn about you, and you get maybe 30 minutes with someone. That's a lot of time for them to like learn about you. And then when they do get to a phone call, they'll be like, hey, I listened to your podcast. I love what you're doing. I love that show that you did with Alex, maybe. And you sound like a really good fit for me. Can you help? And yeah, it's like the sales process begins outside of the sales process. So it's like within the marketing. And that's really the key. Like if you want to convert more, create better content, marketing, and social proof before people even get onto the phone call. So some of the things that we do with our clients right now is we make sure that people have gone through a certain funnel or a certain process before they get to a phone call, because they're going to be twice as likely to convert, because they're going to be much more warm. They're going to know what that coach offers, and there's going to be social proof. So when he makes a statement or she makes a statement, people believe the statements they make in terms of their results because they've seen them pre-phone call, versus if you make statements on the call and they've not seen that proof before they got on the phone call, then they're going to go, well, I'm not sure and I need to think about it, because they probably want to go back and check that you're telling the truth.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people realize that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting too that you bring up that pre-sales process, because prior to actually learning a bit more about sales and changing up the way that we conduct our sales calls at Beyond Macros, we really didn't have things dialed in from like the science of sales perspective. But the thing is, we had so much content on the front end that people were seeing, and they had to jump through so many hoops to get on that call that the close rate on that call was astronomical. People were, they already had to put a deposit down just to show up to that call. So, they were already pre-qualified. And, we had probably one of the crappiest sales processes from like a pure like sales perspective that you can imagine. Yet we were still seeing more than 70% of the people getting on those calls ending up as clients.
There you go. So that's a good example of the process, right? You're taking them through like a nurturing sequence. And this is like marketing and sales done in the best way, is when the marketing process actually contributes to the conversion process. It's not just like hooking someone in. It's actually about like doing a lot of the hard work before they get to the phone call. And so people, when it comes to sales, need to be thinking about that pre-process as much as they do about their sales process itself, as clearly it's working for you and it's increased your conversion ratio. Because imagine if they hadn't seen anything and they get to that phone call, your chances of converting going to be much lower. And then you're going to have to invest a ton more time going through way more people to then get that sale. So maybe you close 1 in 2 with your current nurturing process. But if you don't have that, then you close 1 in 4. So then you've got to spend an extra, 2 hours, 3 hours on phone calls just to find a sale, because you've not got as enough like credibility, know, like, and trust, or warm prospects coming through the funnel and the process.
Exactly. And I know we've just talked a lot about that pre-sales call process, but once people are on a sales call, what do you think are some of the important things to actually draw out from that person on the other side? So if I'm the coach talking to you, what should I be trying to learn about you, and what should I be actually gathering in terms of information to best position my products or services?
Yeah, great question. I like to think of this process just like a doctor would see a patient. Every time I explain it like this, people just get it, right? So when you go to a doctor, you generally have some symptoms, right? So you'll maybe have a rash, you'll have a sore throat, you'll have a stomach ache, and you'll go to the doctor and you'll explain all the symptoms that you've got. And then the doctor doesn't actually go, okay, here's your prescription. They actually probe, ask questions, and they do their own diagnosis because they are the specialist. So a lot of people will come to you and they'll think they know what the problem is, but when you've got experience of diagnosing problems, you'll probably know that what they think it is not what it actually is. And so I basically approach it with my duty to figure out what the root cause of the problem is, what's really holding them back, or what's really in the way. And so we really have to kind of dig into that and do a discovery. But I would have like a certain structure to it, because I feel like the structure of the call is really important. And I can give you a little bit of a snippet of the structure of my calls, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful for people to see.
Cool. So I would open it up, first of all, by just building a little bit of rapport, right? So just having a little bit of a chat, but not too long, because you don't want to be talking about the weather and where they live for more than 60 seconds or 2 minutes, because then you look unprofessional and that you don't value your time, right? So you don't want to just be talking about generic stuff for too long, but just get into the rapport building, build a bit of a human connection. Maybe they live in the same place or whatever, or you've been to their location. Build that rapport really fast. And then this is probably one of the most important parts in starting the process, is you need to pre-frame. So you need to set the agenda of how the phone call is going to go. So you don't just go straight into diagnosing and digging and trying to go into the pain points. You want to like preset the call and create the agenda. So I would say something along the lines of, so let me just quickly explain how today's call is going to go. I just want to keep it nice and structured for us. I want to start by asking you a few questions about your business and how it's all working right now. And that's really just going to give us some clarity on where you are right now, where you want to be. And then from there, it sounds like one of our programs could be a good solution. I'll explain what we do and how it all works.
Yeah.
I'm almost giving them like an insight as to how the call is going to go, because I want to alleviate any anxiety about getting hit with like an offer, or why I'm asking questions, or when am I going to give them more info on what I do. So it's kind of like I'm telling them the framework of the process up front. I'm being super transparent. Transparency is key. And then they're going to feel much more relaxed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes total sense.
Cool. And then I would just start with a broad question. Hey, what motivated you to hop on a call with me today? I'd love to learn a little bit more about like what you're hoping to gain from this call. And just let them go off and start that answering process. And then what I do is I go digging into the specifics. So this is the really important part. I'm not going to go into like all the questioning, but the way I would approach it is you need to understand where point A is, their current situation, which is generally going to be what I call hell, right? And it will be hell to some people, or it will be discomfort to a lot of people, or it will be pain. And then you need to figure out where point B is, which is the desired situation or heaven, because you need to have 2 points, right? So you need to show them that they're at point A and they want to be at point B, which is hell and heaven, their current situation, desired situation. And you need to figure out what the gap is and why they're struggling to get from point A to point B, because in the process, you're going to position yourself in a compelling way in the middle to take them from A to B quicker. And that's how every single product on the planet works. If you look at any product, it's an A and B solution. A bottle of water is from a supermarket is an A and B solution. So versus going up into the mountains, purifying the water myself, finding something to drink it out of, and then trekking back down and drinking it, I just go to the supermarket and buy a bottle of water. And they've taken it from A to B and kept me hydrated in a fraction of the time, at a fraction of the cost. And it's the same with coaching. Like people at point A and they want to get to point B. Now they could go for years trying to figure it out on their own, trying to figure out the solutions, go through a lot of pain and frustration, have to trek all around the world to try and figure it out. Or they can come to you and they can speed up that process by 2x, 3x, 4x, sometimes 10x. But you've got to help them see that, and you've got to build that authority on the phone call and that trust as well, that you can take them from point A to point B. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So just to recap, we've got establishing rapport quickly, not taking it to an unprofessional level, and then really pre-framing the call, making sure that they understand, okay, this is how things are going to run. That way they're not confused or anxious about if they're going to get hit with some hard sell out of nowhere. And then from there, you want to start drawing out that information like the doctor. You want to actually start diagnosing, okay, here's where they're at, here's where their vision of themselves is. And then from there, you want to establish that gap so that you can position what you do as the solution that gets them there faster, simpler, whatever it happens to be.
Perfect. Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, sales feels like a slimy thing. But when I hear that, that sounds very much an integrity to me, because I've been on calls with people where they figure out where I'm at, they figure out where I want to go, and they'll be like, listen, we don't actually have a solution that necessarily fits you. And you can be in that sales process and be in full integrity, which I think is something that a lot of coaches struggle with. Is they want to like coach on that call. They really want it to be an initial consultation and like talk for most of it. So what do you think some of the shifts are that you've seen coaches you've mentored make when it comes to like being that coach who like talks, doesn't diagnose and properly position their product, versus a coach who actually does well and makes the sales?
Yeah. I mean, what you've got to realize when it comes to this process is you've got to enter it with the prospect or the potential client's best interests, right? And so we have to be professional about the way we approach it. And like I said, act like a doctor and do a correct diagnosis. If you're trying to prescribe things too quickly, like that's unethical. You've not taken the time to really understand what the problem is. So how do you have the right to start coaching someone?
Yeah.
Right. So you can't go in too quickly and start to create solutions, even though that's what you want to do and that's your nature. And I get it. But that's not going to be the solution for them. You cannot fix someone in a 30-minute phone call, which is not designed to be a coaching call, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to think long-term, what is in the best interest of that prospect or that potential client. It's one, to diagnose the problem and prescribe them a solution that's actually going to fix the problem. So that would be your products and services. Now, the shifts that PTs or online coaches or nutritionists who do well make, the mental shifts, is they actually believe that their product and solution is what the client needs. So they have self-belief and conviction in what they're selling, because it's very difficult to sell something or even offer something if you don't 100% believe that this is the best solution for that person that you're speaking to. So it requires a lot of self-work on really like affirming to yourself that your product and solution is the best, and it's the best solution for that person that you're speaking to. Now, if it's not the best, I tell people to start working on themselves first, and then start working on that product to make sure that it is the best solution.
I love that.
If you go on phone calls with people, you need to make sure that you've got the correct solutions for them. And if you don't think it's good enough, then you need to do work on yourself, and you need to do work on that product to make sure that it's good enough. And yes, like, it doesn't have to be this amazing, amazing product when you first launch it, but at least have that conviction that when you take someone on, that you're going to get them results. And if you genuinely believe that you're going to get people results, you will be more comfortable in making offers. And when it gets a little bit choppy and there's a little bit of fear from the other side and there's a little bit of pushback, you'll be able to guide them through it, because you'll know that this is the best decision for them to make.
I love that.
Getting a little bit of sun in my eyes.
Yeah, I noticed, because it's morning for you, night for me. So you're starting to get that rising sun.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I love that idea that you're saying work on yourself and then work on the product and then get back on those calls with conviction. And I talk a lot about inner work on my shows, on my mentorships. I think it's a really important aspect of things. And I'm curious what that means to you to do the work on yourself.
Yeah, so it's a constant process. Now, I mention this book every time someone asks me about mindset, and you've probably listened to it or read it, Matt. I would consider this one of the probably best books on mindset on the planet, and to really help you construct the right self-image that's going to allow you to, one, build an amazing business, build amazing relationships, sell better, become more wealthy, create more impact. Like, it's going to help you create the version of yourself that you want to create. And like I said, by far, I think this is the best book you can find. I'm wondering if you know what it is, because you're starting to smile now. So anyone watching this he's starting to smile, but he's probably waiting for the punchline. It's Psycho-Cybernetics.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah. Everyone kind of gets it when I explain it that way. Psycho-Cybernetics by it's Maxwell Holtz, if I remember the name correctly. But this is basically all about self-image, the way that you see yourself. And this is the same thing that athletes do. So if you look at any high-performing athlete, they almost like, well, they don't almost, they do this. They visualize them actually like crossing the line first, or like jumping a certain distance, or completing a certain race in a certain time. And they're almost like creating what we call like they're leveraging the theater of the mind, because your mind can't distinguish between what is real and what is not real. It actually can't distinguish. So if you play these thoughts and visions in your mind, you can actually program it to your advantage. And so I've taken the principles from that book, and also a lot of things that I've learned from mentors who perform at super, super high level. And one of the things that they practice and I've adopted is basically having like a morning formula where I do my programming. So I program my mind. So before I do
amazing
notes, and before I got on this podcast today, I programmed it. So it's kind of like updating your computer to like a better RAM or a better speed or more power. And I'm constantly updating it over and over again, because it's an evolutionary process and it's never static. It's always changing. So I wake up and I go through this ritual, which is basically, I think it's about a 6 or 7 page document where it's got a series of items on there, including visions, statements, standards, ethics, goals, affirmations, everything that if you were to read it, you could pretty much get a good picture of who I'm going to be in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Notice what I said then. who I'm going to be in the next 5 years, not who I am now. Okay. And this is the trick, right? You can actually like put a request out there to be a certain version of yourself in the future by programming yourself now to almost act in accordance with that version of yourself. So like, for instance, let's make this super practical for people that are on this podcast and we're talking about sales. Like if right now you really fear sales and you don't feel like you're good at sales, that is the story that you're telling yourself, right? Through past experiences and what's happened to you before on these phone calls. Now, if you wanted to, you could intercept that thought process and belief system, and you can reprogram your mind to believe that one, you like sales, and two, that you're good at sales. Now, you can't do it overnight, Matt. You can't do it in 2 weeks. Just like no one can go to the gym for a couple of sessions and have a six-pack or be shredded. Like it just doesn't work. And it's the same with the mindset, particularly when you've gone through 20, 30 years of bad programming, you're going to have to spend years undoing that and creating better programming. So, but you can do it, but you've got to be consistent and you've got to program your mind every single morning. Or I also have a recording of it and I'll play it to myself. So I'll be hearing myself saying the words out loud as I go to sleep. And so my subconscious is then digesting that version of myself. And then I wake up and guess what? The actions that I take, the things that I do are all in line with what I'm saying, because that is almost like my North Star and it's guiding me subconsciously to where I want to be. So you can reprogram anything. And for me, that's been integral in business. I'd say if you did one thing in your business that was going to move the needle more than anything, it would be that. Working on your mindset, programming your mind in the right way, and building like really good self-belief and characteristics that are in line with the person that you want to be. Because if you can become 20% more productive and have 20% more belief and 20% more kind of conviction developed in the products that you're selling, then your revenue will go up by 20% without you changing anything.
Yeah.
No more marketing, no more different sales processes. It's just you, especially if you're a coach or you're a mentor, like you're the integral part of the business. If you're not looking after yourself, then you're not looking after your business. And how the hell are you going to look after other people? And that starts with looking after your mind.
Oh man. So cool to hear you say that too. I was wondering if you had done any recordings for yourself, because that's something I picked up from Bob Proctor and a lot of his seminars. And as soon as I started recording things and listening to it, it's like, for most people, you trust yourself. You've got to at least trust yourself a little bit. So to hear that voice that you trust saying these things is, I feel like that took me from like programming myself looking at a journal, the written words, to listening to that. It was like 5 times better in terms of how much I actually believed it. And the beach house that I just bought with my fiance now, it's like we both collectively had recorded what we were looking for and when we were going to get it. And like clockwork, it happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And it's like people expect to be in a certain place or have certain things or create a certain impact or give to a certain charity or whatever it is, but then they don't like ask for it or they don't write it down. So they don't have like a clear vision of it or a clear map. And so their results are basically inaccurate or scattered or inconsistent. And it's just like a roadmap in a sense. And I always go back to this analogy is like, if you're trying to get to a certain point, like when you're driving or traveling, you need to have kind of a map to get there. Otherwise, you're going to go on all these crazy little roads and paths, and it's probably going to take you a lot longer, and you're probably going to end up somewhere that you didn't actually want to be. And it's the same with like your life. Everyone has the decision listening to this to get to a certain point and choose their own destinations. But that starts with being consistent about building the map to get there. Without the creation of the map and understanding what you want as well, because a lot of people will create maps, but I'm like, well, why do you want that? What's the reason? What's the why behind it? Because you can get a map and you can want a destination, But if you don't have a why to achieving it, you will not stick to that for the next 12 months. You'll go, yeah, this is great, I'm loving it. You'll do it for 2 weeks and then you'll fall off. And it's the same with like coaching clients, isn't it? And fitness clients. Like, you've got to remind them why they got started. Why did you want to get into this shape? Why did you want to go from where you are to where you want to be? And when you remind them, they're like, well, yeah, I remember now. I was unhappy, I was unhealthy, I felt unloved by my partner, and I want that affection back. And the only way I feel I can get that is if I get in the best shape of my life. Okay, let's get to work then. So understanding like people's whys as well. You've got to understand your own why, and be self-aware. Particularly if you're running a business. If you're not self-aware, you're going to get smoked by people who understand themselves, because they will destroy you.
That's awesome. Man, I love the fact that we went from sales and we're ending this podcast on personal development, psycho-cybernetics, programming the mind. It's awesome. So Alex, is there anything else that you feel like our audience would need to know about their sales process, developing themselves so that they feel confident in their own sales process? Or shall I just start directing people to where they can find more about you?
Yeah, I'd like to end on this, because I've learned from so many different salespeople, right? So many different, I bought so many programs, I've learned from so many mentors, so many pros, so many experts. And here's the thing, right? I think a lot of people are always searching for like the way to do it. But like anything in business, there's a million ways to skin a cat. Okay, so there's no right or wrong way of doing things. There's better ways of doing things, but what you need to do is you need to find a process that works for you and stick to that process, and don't just keep chopping and changing all the time, because it's kind of like picking a niche. You pick a niche and then you start to understand that niche, and then you go, oh, actually, what about this niche? And then you try that niche, or niche as you call it. Then you're never going to get good at doing or serving that audience. And same with the sales process. Once you start finding something that works for you and you're comfortable with, stick to that and then refine. So like tweaks and improvements, look for feedback, and then just build on it. And don't just be looking for the next shiny object and the next way of selling. Like, find a process from a reputable source, because most of them work. If not all of them work, it's whether you work and whether you refine the process and you look for the feedback loops and you take the framework and you adapt it to your personality and the way you do things. Because like I said before, it's an art, not just a science. There's so many variables. And so there's never going to be like a perfect script that you can follow that's going to get the job done. There's frameworks, but it comes down to you to find something that works for you.
Thank you so much for clarifying that and making that distinction. I think that's such a good way to wrap up the gift that you've given all of us today, Alex. So if people want to learn more about you and what you're up to, where can they find you?
Sure. So a couple of assets for people to go check out. I've done around 60 shows now, called the Coaching Ignited podcast. We'll have to get you on as a guest as well. So head over to that. It's on all the major platforms, including Spotify and iTunes. So Coaching Ignited podcast. Equally, like, I'm always on Facebook or Instagram, and then it's just Alex C. Povey, and you can find me there. And that's probably the best place to connect. I probably spend most of my time on Facebook. So Alex Povey on Facebook. Connect with me there. Let's just connect. I can send you some resources if you're looking for something specific. And yeah, those are the best places to find me.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Alex. I really appreciate all that you've shared today. And for the audience, go check this man out, because if you need to refine your sales process, he's going to have some more gold nuggets for you.
Cheers, bro. Appreciate you having me on. Really do.
Later, Alex. I hope you've enjoyed this interview with Alex Povey. In the comments below, tell me, are you confident with your sales process? And what are you going to change after this video? While you're down there in the comments, please make sure to like the show and subscribe to the channel to get notified when we release new shows to help you run your coaching business more profitably and serve your clients more effectively. Much love, Beyond Macros heroes. I'll see you next time.